Hi everyone, in this tutorial we're going to show how to do a few different effects to make your pie piece a little more interesting before you start to copy and paste it. So in my work I had some details that I wanted to include, but they were either too tiny to include with a pencil and to scan in, or they were effects that I knew I wanted to do in Adobe. So for instance, this painting here, I had a different artwork in this frame. I didn't really like it when I scanned it. So I used different size and different color paintbrushes to just paint in a little painting. And that's what all these lines are. You can actually see all the lines drawn when I hit the selection on it. So that's what happened with this one. But over here for my cactus, I would actually like to have more detail lines. And what I can do is just go to my paintbrush, and I want to make sure I have a stroke color set up, not the fill, but the stroke color. And I can just draw, ooh, that's way too large. I'm going to change the size of that paintbrush to be much smaller. There we go, that's better. And there's a shortcut on your keyboard for changing your paintbrush size. It's the bracket keys. So they're right next to the letter P. If you go to the right of the letter P, the bracket on the left will make it smaller. The bracket on the right will make your paintbrush bigger. And that's a fun little shortcut. So that's how I added some detail on the cactus. And some other cool effects are I wanted the steam to look like it was actually steam, which means I wanted to use a white fill and then change the opacity down to be very low. So to get this effect, what I had to do was use my direct selection tool, which is my A. I hit A on the keyboard. Now I have my white arrow. I select the inside shape here. Let me just delete it so I can show you from the start. So I select the inside shape. I hit Command C, Command V. And now I have a version of it over here. So I just made a copy of this shape. I made a copy of it because what I want to do is I want to fill this with white, and I want to lower the opacity so I can see through it. So right now my fill is see-through and my stroke is black. I want to take my fill, I'm going to make it white, and let me carefully move it. And I'm using my selection tool to move it back. And see how it's white? Getting there. But I want to take the opacity. Let's bring that down to, let's try 30%. That's a little too low. So let's make it 50%. That's probably better. So now what I have is it looks like it's a little see-through. That's what I have for this one too. You can actually, if I use my direct selection tool and I just select the inside shape and I drag it down, oop, it's a little hard sometimes to pull it. Nope. So I'm going to select it with my direct selection tool and then move it with my selection tool. But you can see how that shape is the same thing. This is actually opacity 30 and it's white. So it's a little bit even lighter than this one, which was 50. That's another little effect you can do. And this is a good reminder, to select a shape, use your direct selection tool. Select it with the direct selection tool, but not to move it. If you try and move it, you're going to just change the shape of it a million times. It's easier to move it with your selection tool. So let's put you back. Here we go. So if I want to move you, if I want to select you, I use my direct selection tool. And if I want to move you, I use my selection tool. I can drag you down here. So that's how you can make the change in opacity for something. And just for consistency, let's make this shape 30 and not 50. Now that should look a little more consistent. Let's see what else happened. I put the shadows under the candle wax. Same thing, I just took my paintbrush and I picked a color that was kind of darker than this blue, like a gray, like a tone, a shade or tone of blue. And use my eyedropper to get this color. And then click on, I can drag it down here to get a darker tone. Just move it down in your color picker. And I can now use my paintbrush. Again, the paintbrush should use a stroke, not a fill. So if I just reverse these And if I take my opacity, I think I had this one at 50 as well. We can try that. And let's draw a little shadow. Ooh, way too big. Let's make you a lot smaller. You can see it drew as a solid, but then when I let go, it became a opacity. And if I click off of this, I can see what it looks like. And here, same thing, this rabbit has all paint on it. This is a paint line, this is a paint line, this is where you can see there's pink and white, because all these details are just too small to draw. But your work can still have tiny details, you have to make it in Adobe. So look at your artwork and think if there's any way you can paint on it. Oh, the moon also. You can see here the moon, I just lowered the opacity of all these different marks, made them with a paintbrush. They're just very light gray, so they're almost not visible. So try and think if there's any way you could add some interest to your work by either painting over with paint or by changing opacities around. If you want to add a gradient to an object, you can also do that. We'll talk about gradients a little more in the next tutorial for the background. But it's going to add a lot of visual interest if you can do something to your artwork before you start to copy paste it. One thing you should do though is after you make all your changes, you want everything to be grouped together. So let's go here. My circle's locked, so I can make a selection and not include this line segment. I want to make a selection over everything I just did. And see, this all becomes selected. And I want to go to Object and Group. Because right now, if I move it and it's not grouped, all those little marks I made might not travel with everything. So this way, now I can make everything move together. And that's what I want to do before I start to copy and paste it and fill in my circle. I want to make sure that I have all my safeguards in place. And that's how you add a little bit of visual interest to your work.